Hey everyone, I want you to listen. First of all, I'm going to play about a 2 minute video presented by someone from Bloomberg Business regarding how the price of oil per barrel over the last 3 decades, how it's fluctuated dramatically from highs and lows and everywhere in between. But basically, you've seen three massive spikes and then complete drop offs, like dropping off the cliff as far as oil prices. And I need you to understand the why. That's the thing with political propagandists and media pundits that want to, confuse and confound you regarding this shit. They'll never tell you the why. Not they won't present the ethical, moral, or objective reasoning behind their opinions. They'll just present the story and then use their particular form of propaganda and opinion forming to hope that you'll fall in line with whatever narrative they put forward without questioning them, because they expect you to yield and conform to their authority. But people like myself that don't want to control or manipulate anyone else, I want you to understand the truth. So listen to this 2 minute video and see if you can come up with and understand, the cause and effect correlations here. What is the result of all these price changes in a particular commodity or resource? Here we go.
The price of oil has tanked, majorly tanked, 4 times in the past 3 decades, and each time it's been because a glut of oil has flooded the market. It's pretty simple. More supply than demand makes oil cheap. Now, the reason for the oversupply has been different each time, but the outcome has always been the same. It takes months, sometimes years, for the oil market to correct itself. Back in the mid-80s, oil production surged in Alaska and other parts of the US. Saudi Arabia confronted the threat by opening its taps, and prices plunged more than 60% to $10 a barrel, about $20 today. US producers suffered, Saudi Arabia regained control of the market, and it wasn't until 4 years later in 1990 that prices went back to pre-1986 levels. A decade later, OPEC increased production because of increased demand coming from Asia, but the timing couldn't have been worse. A financial crisis erupted across the region, demand plummeted, and once again prices collapsed to almost as low as $10 a barrel. OPEC quickly reversed its decision and slashed production, and the next year, prices more than doubled. The oil market suffered the steepest crash in its history in 2008 because of the global recession. When the economy tanked, so did the demand for oil, and prices fell 78% to about $30 a barrel. OPEC stepped in and agreed to its biggest ever production cuts, which helped the price recover through 2009. That brings us to the most recent oil climb. American oil output has almost doubled in the past 5 years because of shale production. But OPEC has refused to cut back. There's roughly enough oil in storage to power the entire developed world for 2 months. Prices dropped more than 70% to less than $30 a barrel. And with both OPEC and the major US producers not significantly cutting back, recovering from this slump might take even longer than in the past.
So think about what was said. What are the underlying fundamentals that you could take away from what was presented in that short 2 minute video? For me, it's easy. Central planning and price fixing. Without allowing genuine market forces, which when we're talking about market forces, I don't think a lot of people, I don't think really anyone outside of people that are, that have no skin in the game as far as central planning and price fixing, very few people will tell you that when you're talking about the market or the free market, what they really should be saying is free people, right? So basically, the market is just people. The market is just based on everybody's natural tendencies. That's what, when you're talking about the market, you're talking about people and their natural tendencies. And natural tendency would be for, if in a situation where you have excess, right, a massive excess of a particular product or commodity, such as the environment we live in today, well, the price should be really, 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 of that particular product or commodity should be really, really cheap, because there's such a glut of that product. So if you make the price of that product low enough, well, there will no longer be a glut, because people will be able to afford to consume that product at a level so that it'll bring, that glut of the in line with the actual natural needs and desires of the populace of societies, so that if oil is in such huge demand and there's not enough supply, well, of course, that's usually natural forces says if there's only a very finite amount of that resource being extracted and the demand super exceeds that by a substantial amount, well, that price of that product or commodity is going to have an increased value to reflect that. That's just natural forces. That's no different than, if you went to a flea market or a store or anything, if they have huge gluts of the product, the price is going to be lower. If it's rare, a commodity or something, it's good, the price. So natural prices are always a direct reflection of the supply and demand. But what they're saying in this video is 4 times in just the last 3 decades alone is it's been proven multiple times that central planning, price fixing using cartels such as the OPEC or central planning, how it completely manipulates and distorts those natural market forces that give proper prices. Pricing is always supposed to be based on natural market forces, and that is what keeps everything on a proper and steady method where people aren't surprised, confused, or confounded, right? That's what allows humans to not to have to put a whole lot of effort into figuring out, well, why is this right? Or no, you will know by natural forces and natural market forces. Oil prices should be a direct reflection of that. And if it's not, then it's all based on speculation and manipulation. So when you're talking about the price of oil today, even though they've been trying to create the atmosphere or the illusion that prices should go back up because these companies, some of these companies are suffering and blah, 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 blah. But in reality, well, they're going to have to fucking suffer, whether they like it or not, because they relied on central planning, mysticism, and price fixing as their business model. So it doesn't work properly. And it has been proven, as we're seeing multiple times, that never, it's an illusion that you can't maintain for long. Whereas natural forces, natural market prices, well, it's like saying, well, of course gravity is going to be gravity. Gravity is gravity. You can't change it. You can't directly central plan or manipulate gravity. Gravity has to be gravity. You have to have a proper formulation. So if you want to, escape the gravitational forces, you have to input more power than the gravitational forces are imposing on you. So it allows every human being to understand the formulation to exceed those restrictions. But when you're having central planning and price fixing as the premise for any of these prices of these commodities, well, of course, it's all up in the air. Nobody can give an honest, objective, natural price to these things because they're manipulated. So the only thing that can happen, and we see the only inclination that you see of actual natural market forces is that temporary time frame where when you've seen where the OPEC countries and they realized they were losing market share to all this central planning and price fixing, when they realized that people like the oil sands the producers in Canada or the shale producers in the US, when they realized that by price fixing, the only people that were gaining and benefit from that were, these mega corporations or central planners that were benefiting from these false prices, these overly inflated prices. So what happened? When the Saudis and the OPEC countries said, okay, we're no longer going to be a cartel and price fix everything, well, you've seen what happened. the prices started dropping off like a cliff. That was the only true aspect of natural market forces happening, because it's people saying, well, okay, this equation equals this equation. Well, the end result is going to be this. But that's the thing. As you're seeing, that only happens for so long. Natural market forces only get to have any say in the matter for a short time frame before central planners and price manipulators intervene. So, like, don't you all get sick of all this? I mean, just think of the amount of the expenditures that are wasted, and the wealth and the productivity that's wasted from all this shit. When what should happen is natural prices should be reflected. Humans' natural inclination for their demand and the supply of a particular product, resource, or commodity, that should always be reflected, because then it's easy when the formulation is universal. It's easy to know for the business, the owner of a particular business, regardless of what commodity they use. It's easier for them to understand and know where they should go, what their business model should represent, and what they should do as far as investments, right? That's easily understood when you're talking about natural market forces, but for the common sense human being and an investor, they're like, in these central planning structures that we're currently forced to live under, nobody has any genuine understanding of what a proper price for a 45-gallon barrel of oil should be. How the hell would anyone know? The only way you'll ever know what the natural price of that should be would be to allow natural forces work. Then we'll find out. But as you see, the most important thing to central planners and manipulators and price fixers is to keep that system going so they can manipulate constantly. So there's no such thing as natural market forces at play. I mean, when you're talking about oil in particular, over 3 billion barrels of oil are being stored in onshore facilities all over the world, whether it's Cushing, Oklahoma, or down in Texas, or somewhere in Europe, or all these other places where you see those big, gigantic storage containers for oil. What's happening instead of, I mean, we're not under wartime where you have to have a big, gigantic buildup of these inventories to, in case some country that you're invading is not going to provide you with a service. So when you have this excess capacity and overbuilt inventories, there's no natural reasons for it, but they're really doing it is to try to maintain and elevate the prices of that particular commodity. Because if you flooded the industry or the world, the markets, with this excess capacity, well, the prices would drop off like a cliff. But because the central planners, the control freaks, and the parasites that live off these overinflated valuations, they don't want anyone to recognize that reality, because they would be the ultimate losers if that ever happened. Another thing that's happening too that a lot of people probably don't understand, because it's only been reported a couple times through the mainstream media, is you even have investors or these big oil, big business industries that are now renting the VLCs, very large carriers or whatever they're called, and they're renting them, and if they're hoping that the price of oil will bounce back to say $60 or $70 a barrel, what they're doing is they're renting these big storage vessels, filling them with like 1 million plus barrels, let's say, right, and hoping that, well, we pay, let's say, $38 per barrel, and we're going to stash a million barrels onto this ship. Well, we're hoping that we can hold that off long enough that when the central planners and price fixers have dominated the industry, where they could raise and elevate the prices to a higher degree, let's say 60, 70, 80, well, we'll sell it then. So it's all complete price manipulation, price fixing. There's no natural forces at work anymore. There's no such thing as the natural market happening. And every time you see that little tiny iota where market forces do have that chance to intervene properly, central planners try to circumvent that as quickly as possible. So what you really have is natural market forces on one end and central planners on the other. And natural market forces are very powerful, but central planners, because they have the power of the purse, monetary policy, and all these mechanisms of legislation, writing the rules in their favor, the lowly market, the lowly people, even though they're massively outnumber these central planners, they don't really have any power because they don't have that master key like the central planners do. So market forces are never going to work properly in central planning environments. You also have as much as 2 million barrels so a day. So multiply that by 365 and you have what you're talking about in the run of a year. But 2 million barrels a day, sometimes even more than that, where you have this excess supply in comparison to the demand. So, I mean, eventually, just like if you had a 50-gallon drum yourself stashed in your backyard, you can keep filling that up as much as you want, but at some point in time, you're going to reach the top. And you can't build facilities. That's another thing. They're trying to build facilities to keep this Ponzi scheme going, but you can't build them as fast as the amount of commodities that are being brought into the market. So, yeah, eventually you're going to meet that brick wall, and eventually that the price of those products, those commodities, are going to have to reflect natural market forces. When that happens, then you'll see the prices will do another nosedive once again. Be smart out there. I mean, just keep all this stuff in mind when you're dealing with whether you're an investor or a purchaser or a consumer. Keep all this stuff in mind so that you're smart and wise. Don't squander any of your wealth needlessly. Wealth these days are hard to come by from people that use proper morals and ethics to do so. If you're a central planner and you just use force and coercion, I guess it's not that difficult at all. But for the vast majority of us, be smarter there. Oh, another thing too. Iran, this whole talk with Iran has already said multiple times that, we're not going to get back into the price fixing game until we at least get our market share back. So that alone should tell you that there's not going to be there's not going to be this whole thing this premise they've been suggesting where the OPEC countries or other oil producing nations, well, we can come together and fix the prices properly. Well, it's not going to happen because everyone wants to get their or keep, maintain, or increase their market share, because central planning has become very expensive these days. They need to do that in order to sustain the lifestyles, the overbloated lifestyles of the central planners and their offshoots. Another thing, the rally is completely built on all oil-producing nations shooting themselves in the foot. So like I just covered here, everyone's always going to keep trying to increase their productive capacity to secure an even higher elevated percentage of the market. That's the only way this shit works probably for them. So, I mean, listen to all these central planners that tell you, oh, don't worry, man, blah, blah, blah. They're full of fucking shit. Oil prices are going to have to go back down. They're actually, at this stage of the game, they're going to have to go down, it seems like, by a fairly substantial amount before natural market forces will be allowed to play it out, and where people can get back on the track and seeing sensible reasoning regarding these commodities and products. I mean, we got to let natural market forces work. That's the only thing that's going to help us. Central planning only makes things worse. It only hinders and hampers the progress of human innovation, human productivity. Throw that shit to the curb. Let natural market forces work. No matter which side of the coin or which side of the equation you fall upon, in the end, in the long run game, you'll all benefit from it. That's just the truth. That's just reality. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.